Hi, I'm Christopher Jaynes, CTO and founder of Mersive Technologies, and we're here for the webinar kickoff of Active Learning. So this is a product we've been looking at for almost 2.5 years now, with about 50 universities providing data to us over a research program about how can technology play an important role in enabling more and better experiences in the active learning space. So we'll talk a little bit about that product. I'm going to first set you up because we're standing in a really cool room. This is our sort of research lab where we've replicated basically the display layout you might see in an active learning space. So in an active learning environment, you would have 6 to 12 to 15 team tables where each of these screens is being used by the Solstice product to share content for students to work together. But what we've done is we've added a product that will allow you to control the multi-screen environment dynamically to enable new educational use cases. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of setup and some slides, and then we're going to do a live demo, which is the fun part of this webinar, and then we'll end by sort of wrapping up with our roadmap. So I'm going to take you through that now. So bear with me. We'll just go ahead and look at a couple of these slides here. So quick comment about the agenda today. We're going to talk about the product in general, and I really want to make it clear that active learning is not just about technology. So when we were developing the technology underpinning the product you're about to see, we were really interested in how can we augment the pedagogy in these spaces, sort of the teaching and learning workflows, and overcome some of the challenges in these active learning environments. So you'll see some of that. Key features and benefits, of course, I'll want to talk about why this stuff matters in those spaces. We'll go into some of the specific use cases you see in an active learning environment, everything from broadcasting from the front of the room, display to all the team tables, to how do I know when students may be having trouble and how can I engage with them. A little bit of system overview, some of the underlying technology, and then how does this stuff get enabled on the network. Then we'll finally demo it, and we'll talk about how you can get a hold of it as well. So we've made it easy, luckily, for you to take a look at it and give it a try. So what is it really? So this product is a software-enabled AV over IP multi-screen environment control system. So that's a mouthful, but really what it means is I can walk into a room that has many screens that students are working together on, and then drag and drop video to route different tables to other places in the environment dynamically. So that's pretty exciting. And here's what's really interesting about the solution. There's no customized hardware. So just a couple of comments about what's happened in the past in these active learning spaces and why we got involved. We were told by our own customer community who were deploying pods at each of the team tables that Solstice is a fantastic collaborative tool for the teams sitting together as peers, working through problem sets, sharing content, working together, becoming engaged. But that's kind of where the story ended. In an active learning space, we're only left to two options. You could go the hardware-based route where you're buying, matrix switchers, running cables through the floor, figuring out cable repeater lengths to get everything back to the closet, and then hiring a programmer to basically build you your UI custom per space. Obviously, those are all headwinds to getting a successful active learning space built, and it's not amenable to basically what is one of the best teaching and learning pedagogies out there. It's complicated, so we wanted to overcome that. The other approach, of course, is software-based systems that are a little more similar to what we've just built, but those systems are really replicating that cable AV experience in software. And what we wanted to do is start top down and work with the universities to build feature sets that are very specific to the educational problems you find. And you'll see some of those built into the product. So it's flexible and affordable. What I mean by that is it's very flexible in that there's no new hardware. There isn't even a centralized router like some of the other systems out there. It's really every pod is now enabled with the ability to encode video, send video, receive video on demand through a third-party application that you can download right out of the App Store. Okay, that application is built on an intuitive, completely drag and drop UI. We definitely learned that that's the way people like to use Solstice, so that's the way you'll use active routing. It supports, of course, both educational use cases, and there are already some customers that have raised their hand and said, we need that. We are doing multi-screen confidence monitors. So there are corporate use cases for the applications, of course. And when I show you the architecture slide, you'll realize there's almost no architecture. We're talking about using your existing networking switches to just plug in pods and go. So really the goal of this project was to unlock the sort of potential of active learning. Now, if you know me, my background is in education as well, and there's a huge pent-up demand for active learning spaces. Almost everyone on the planet knows about it, but only about 2% of the teaching and learning spaces on a common campus are actually enabled for active learning, which is really a shame because there's plenty of evidence that shows students acquire content faster, they retain knowledge longer, and they even become year over year more engaged with a multi-year program if they're able to engage in an active learning space. Okay, so that is awesome. Those studies included folks like the National Academy of Science. The problem is all the solutions out there are either very expensive or based on hardware and require basically design build challenges that reduce your ability to deploy quickly. So we're hopefully going to change that. Almost became like a social mission for us about a year and a half ago when we started to engage with the community on how do we build this out. So I wanted to get to a point where we have a 5-year total cost of ownership that's much lower than the hardware-based solutions, especially if you start to count things like custom programming that those solutions required. We wanted to have flexibility to repurpose your existing spaces. So imagine how cool it would be if you've got a lecture hall that's got a bunch of tables and chairs in it, and you could reconfigure that space for a semester just by wheeling in screens, pods, and then walking into that space with an iPad and be able to control video between those destinations. So I think that's what we've unlocked. And then, of course, I won't talk about it a ton in this webinar, but there is an API that drives all of this because, of course, we have some awesome partners in the AV integrator channel, design consultant houses that do great jobs, engaging with educators to build beautiful spaces. We do not want to get, into a situation where their expertise can't come to bear when you're building out systems. So if you want a panel on the wall that, clears all the screens or says show the front screen on all tables and you want to build that into your own app, go for it. Just use the API. It's a REST API and very easy to get access to, and develop some add-on capabilities even. Okay, so, easy to deploy, configure, and use. Well, the interesting part, I think, here is we've solved 2 problems. We've solved the design challenge that these active learning spaces have, and then we just solved the how can I engage with an active learning space with basically no training. So if you look at how things have happened in the past, if I wanted to stand up a new active learning room, I'm basically building a custom UI per room, and I'm hiring specialized programmers to do that. The app I'm going to show you has a stage that lets a space designer, a teaching and learning educator, or a faculty member to actually design their own space by drag and drop elements into a UI and hit save. So that's literally a 0 programming footprint, which I think is awesome. You don't have to hire a specialized programmer to get a room stood up, and that saves both time and money. But there's also this other side effect when you do that if you hire a programmer from the AV community who builds out a beautiful UI for one of your rooms, that person may or may not be around when you build your second room. And now you end up getting UIs that are different as you go between rooms. Our philosophy early on, after we had engaged with those 50 universities I mentioned, so we discovered that there's really a productization that can happen here. Really, it's a one-size-fits-all UI for a beautiful sort of user experience. Much like that gives you a consistent as you move between rooms, which I think is very key, both for students who are experiencing how to share content at the table, but also for the faculty member who may or may not, might be 3 semesters since I've taught a class in one of these active learning rooms, but I remember how to use it. I download the app and I walk in and I'm off to the races. I don't have to relearn a UI. Okay, just a little bit of commentary on the use cases in these spaces. Active learning is really composed of team tables. Students working together in a cohort at those tables, they're encouraged to work together to define how they want to solve problems and then engage even across tables to ask questions like, hey, we're stuck as a team. We noticed you guys have moved on. How did you solve that problem? So there's even cross-team sharing that often happens. And then the faculty or the administrator in that space, their job is to only moderate the environment. So really about creating an experience that says, I'm going to set up a problem, And then I'm going to ask the teams to now take that problem and engage in what the way they see fit, that they're peer, so it's peer guided learning. Why does that matter? Well, at the core, underlying that, you have technology needs. And one of the big ones is video routing amongst all the team tables, on demand, flexibly. So that's not just table to front or front to a table. It's also table to table. That's a use case where team A says, I wish we could do better, we need help. And the faculty administrator might say, interesting, well, team B has done, already has solved that problem. Why don't we take a look at what they're doing and then immediately route their video to team A as an example. And then there's some other use cases that go past routing that we've actually built into the app. And that's what I meant by, you can't just build AV technology and say you're done. You have to ask, in these spaces, what other problems are going to be, emerge as you start to use the technology, and how can we solve those? So I'll show you some things like the ability to instantly message to each table, customized text messages. And of course, these use cases go past like edu, like I said. There's confidence monitors in conference rooms, of course, all over the place where you just need mirroring on demand. You can use our API to turn that on now. Overflow rooms and even training rooms. And and a fun one to think about is even how this gets extended to remote learners. And you can imagine we are 100% on top of that because we're about to launch Solstice Conference, which when combined with this stuff makes a very compelling active learning space that then can be viewed by remote learners. Okay, so I mentioned the design for educators focus. Well, we found out that one of the key problems in an educational environment like an active learning space is you've got a lot of disparate teams who are highly engaged by design. And when it's time to get them to come back to the front of the room or look up front or maybe pause or move on to the next piece of the lesson, it's hard to do that because you're one moderator, maybe with a couple TAs in that space, and you're forced to wander around a fairly large environment. Sometimes these active learning rooms even have pillars or separate rooms even. And say, hey, can you stop talking? We need to, I set up the problem wrong. Can you look up front? So that was a discovery we had in beta. This is stuff we obviously don't invent in a vacuum. It's invented with that council that helped us build the product. So what we built was customizable message queues that allow you literally to design an icon, a message, and when you tap that in our app, it gets displayed on all the team tables right over top of the content they're doing. Their content will fade. And I'll show you that. In the demo. And also another one that's coming soon that's big, and one thing we uncovered in the beta program is the idea that, and I love this one because I used to teach and I remember this happening often, is like, well, wait a minute, that team over there looks completely idle. Or that team over there is laughing, I wonder what they're looking at, I hope it's the content that we're supposed to be working on, etc. So how would you be able to know that without going and walking all the way awkwardly over there and surfing, over their shoulders? We're adding a feature that allows you to tap a table in the UI and it'll pop out a live video feed of what's happening on that screen. We teased that to the beta users and got great feedback, and we found that we just needed better performance, so we're going to release that in the follow-on post-GA. But that'll be a really cool engagement tool because when students put content on their team table, it'll allow me to say, let me just check in on all the tables. How are they all doing? Just by standing there with my iPad or as I wander the space, which I think will be awesome. Okay, so what is the system, the sort of the boring back end? Well, guess what? It's super simple. Basically, the pod is now an AV IP encoder and decoder box on demand. So anything that happens in Solstice can be sent to another Solstice destination and be displayed. Okay, so that's literally all you need. They should be plugged into a switch, of course, and then we'll talk about the topology here next. And then you download an active learning app that's managed inside the Solstice cloud. So role-based management to create users. Those users then have access to set up their own rooms, design a space, and then use and route video. And of course, number 3, the other component of an active learning space is the Solstice Pod experience. Won't talk about it much in this webinar because you probably already know the Solstice Pod, and if you don't, there's plenty of literature out there to learn about why it's really interesting and valuable. But imagine, being able to do AirPlay, Miracast, browserless sharing from Chromebooks, throwing videos onto a screen as a student community at the team table, working together on demand with unlimited content sharing, high performance wirelessly. Okay, so that's what's happening at each of these team tables. The network topology. Well, this is also really quite straightforward. The only thing you have to do is plug each pod with Ethernet into a local, gigabit switch. So that's literally full stop. You've now basically wired your room for active learning. Typically, of course, the switch sits in a comm closet somewhere, but nothing else has to change. So student devices don't have to be on that network. They're, of course, on the student VLAN probably, as long as there's TCP/IP routing back to the pods like there is today. And then the app itself can be even on the facilitator or faculty member network. TCP/IP, of course, back into that room. And then cloud access for the app is fairly critical because I'll show you some features that allow you to do things like customize based on user, your favorite shortcuts and things. And that gets stored in your cloud account, of course, so that you can log in both from an iPad app or a Windows laptop, etc. Okay, and I should point out that these devices, in all cases, work on all major platforms. So if I'm a teacher that wants to come into the space with a Windows 10 device or an OS X device, iPad or Android tablet, all of that works with the active learning application. Okay, same of course for students that are sharing content. So let's get into the demo a little bit. I think that's probably the fun part of the webinar. So I'm going to stop boring you with slides. And I'm going to open up the app that I've already downloaded here. Of course, it's just an app that runs on my iPad. I've just got it here amongst my icons. If you want to have the more traditional bolt it to a desk, in the next release, we will have a kiosk mode that allows you to pre-install the app, log in as a kiosk user. Now, I've already got an invite from the Solstice Cloud. So step one is your Solstice Cloud administrator activates these pods. So I've got a bunch of pods here in the room. Each of these pods has been activated in their cloud account to be active learning enabled. And then you can use the Solstice Cloud role-based management panel to create active learning users and active learning admins. Now, I'm going to log in as both because I'm going to both show you how to design a room and also how to use the room. So I've got 6 team tables here, and I've got the primary display on this side, which happens to be touch because I think that's a very cool use case for active learning. And I'm going to go ahead and launch the Active Learning app. Why don't I move it up here so you guys can see it a little bit better. I'm going to set this guy in a way that's probably a little easier to look at. Okay. You can see I've already logged into my account, and I have rights to edit and modify any of these rooms or use them. I'm going to go ahead and, here we've got Active Studio in Denver HQ, room 105, and I'm going to go ahead and edit that room. And you can see I've already designed a layout that looks like the room we're in. Of course, these are just all on one big wall, not spread out in a cool room. We're in a rectangular space, so I've already defined that. If you've got a square room or a tall room, you can define that in as you build your room out. And on the left side, you can see how I build the space. So like I haven't added a door yet. I'm going to go ahead and do that because that's a nice way to navigate. So maybe we've got actually in this space, the door's kind of over here where you can't really see it. So I'm going to set that guy there. And then I'll even scale it down a little bit because it's not a giant door like that. And you can see I can interactively design this layout. So underneath here, I've got primary displays, flat panels, and projectors. So we had several universities in beta that use both projectors and flat panels. And then my job as the designer of this room is to just make it look like a map of the space, because the goal is, of course, I want to be able to navigate quickly when I need to drag and drop video across the teams. So if I wanted to add like a rectangular table like we've gotten here, I can do that, and then I can rotate that table and drop it into the room somewhere like over here by this display. Okay. So pretty straightforward. This is what I meant by no programming, just drag and drop UI. And then I'm going to hit save in that space, and it says room saved, and then I quit out. Okay. Now, if I want to go in and actually use this room as a user, of course, I walk over to the Active Studio room, and I'm going to use it, so I tap in to use it. Now let's look at what happens when I use it. Okay, so you can see I've got that same UI here with the primary display and some stuff going on the bottom. So I'm going to walk over here and actually show you how we control the video. So the common use case, of course, is when I first start a class, time for me to set up the teaching model. I'm going to put my primary display screen on all screens, and I can just do that by pressing and holding primary display. and it's going to go ahead and broadcast that video to all teams at once. Okay, so that's pretty obvious. If this was live video and I had content on that, obviously it would go to all those screens. We'll show you that in a minute. And if I hit the reset button, of course, now the students go back to viewing what they were working on at each of the team tables. This is a full matrix switch, which means I literally can show video between any destination and endpoint simultaneously. So let's say the yellow team, I want them to share what they're doing with the orange team. I'm just going to drag and drop that. So maybe we can take a look at how this looks. So I've got a live feed going from yellow to the orange team. And you'll notice it doesn't just do that instantly. We learned in beta that we can't do instantaneous transitions, even though the technology could do it. You need to have the students understand what's happening. So it fades in a little bit slowly. And then we show a little message at the top of the screen. Right now, this is saying yellow team is sharing. So the students here know they're being shared. And the students on this table will see that it says shared from yellow team, so they know it's not their own content or get confused. And then, of course, I can do this multiple times. So now I'm going to show purple to the red team, and then I'm going to take the blue team and maybe put it up on the green team. So now I'm doing full matrix switching across that room. And if I want to turn it off, I just hit reset to push everyone back to their own feed. Okay? So that, of course, is a really interesting use case. Another one educationally that is really important in these spaces is the ability to do comparative work to the main display or across tables. So I'm going to do that by saying, why don't we take a look at what the purple team's doing on the main screen. So you can see now I've got purple coming up here, but I want to show, their approach to doing, maybe we're doing automotive design. Their approach is very different, but valid compared to maybe what the orange team's doing. So now I drag and drop that to the front screen, and I can get both of those feeds here. And what I think is fantastic, of course, is if I want to look at their results, I can tap and push back, just like this is now the Solstice experience using the touch display at the front of the room. Okay? So let's put some content on this stuff. So I'm going to ask Trevor, who's off screen, to go ahead and maybe share some content to both yellow and orange, so that we can, now the students are getting underway, they're doing their work, and I say, that's awesome, we're doing a marketing campaign for a new car launch, let's say, and I really like what the yellow team's doing. Okay, and so now what we're doing is getting all the different students to look at what's happening on the yellow screen, and of course, now we're broadcasting video. There's a white paper if you want to look at performance analysis. We actually are really, just like always, incredibly transparent about performance. You can for sure get frame rate speed at sizes of up to like 12 team tables simultaneously, and it'll go past that, but we will actually give you the frame rate fall off as you go past 12 team tables in case you want to design a space that's got 16 or whatever destinations. You can look at what you would expect to get. In that white paper, you can just go to our website to see that. So now if I just hit reset, we can push that content back. And of course, if the previous example, if I wanted to look at these two marketing launch campaigns up at the front display, I can do that. And it's up here touch enabled, and we can go through these two campaigns that these students are presenting. And I can say, okay, orange team, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you did here? I really like it. And how is that different from what the yellow team has been working on today? Okay, now keep in mind that everything that I show in Solstice on that screen is being sent to all destinations. So that's true even for ink. So if I broadcast that primary display, and I'm showing that, and I connect with my phone so that I can use our ink feature to annotate and markup, those markups, actually, Trevor, do you want to put some content on the primary screen for me? That'd be great, because what I'm going to do is show you how this educational use case actually works even if I'm doing mockups, through ink. And I can do that by turning on my laser pointer from here, and you can see that I can simultaneously mark up on all screens to all tables. Okay? Pretty cool. And so if I hit reset here, I want to show you another feature. Awesome, thanks, Trevor. So we've got two teams working. And maybe, like I said earlier on, we added these educational features that are really critical that are not necessarily video routing. One of them is our instant messaging capability. So if you look at the bottom here, we've got the ability got some presets here, primary to all, reset your video, because that's a common one. And I've got a built-in capability to say eyes up front. Well, why do I need that? Well, let's say I set up the marketing challenge for today and I realize everybody misinterpreted what I wanted them to do. Well, it's probably on me as an educator and not the students, so I need to get them to look back up front. So I just tap eyes up front, and all the timetables now will say eyes up front. We will fade their content. That will re-engage them to the front of the room. Well, it was fun because when we put that into beta, we learned right away, wow, you can do that? We want to do other things. So we built a customized creation tool that lets you pick an icon, like let's say, let's be quiet, and then I can type, be quiet into that, and then I can create a custom text field that would then be broadcast. Okay, that gets saved based on role-based management to the cloud account. So if a faculty member shows up tomorrow and they've created, hey, 5 minutes remaining in the quiz, and they log in on an iPad versus what they were using yesterday on their Android tablet, that'll still be there in their account when they log in. So it's persistent across users and it's custom per user. And we're even going to take that farther in the roadmap to allow you to build custom video routes and save those, and even hide this pane and only show your video route cards to go primary to all, juniors to seniors, everyone to their neighbors, kind of different routing capabilities. So that's coming in the roadmap as well. Okay, I think I covered basically everything. I mean, it's a fairly straightforward, simple demo once you understand what we've done. For sure, I want to cover the last couple slides and then take you through how you get access to this stuff. Because, it's quite easy for me to enable these pods and go. It's as easy, for you, I think. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go back to the slides here real quick. I think we accomplished the demo. So like I said, the roadmap does not end here. So this is a constant dialogue, just like everything we do with our community of partners and customers that are using the technology, thinking about, well, if you can do this, can you also do this next? And so that's already happened. That roadmap is quite aggressive. I've already mentioned the ability to tap a table and see what's happening on that table live, which I think is very powerful. The kiosk user that's coming, and the ability to route audio. Now today we didn't do audio because we were learning quite a bit about how users wanted it to experience audio in these spaces. But we've already started down the path in the next release to be able to allow a pod to be denoted as the room audio pod, and whenever you send audio to that destination, we will whenever you send video there, we will route the audio as well. Okay. Yeah, and in addition, of course, conference, like I mentioned, Solstice Conference plus Active Learning, I think is a super killer app, because imagine if this front screen here had, a Logitech meetup on the top of it, and when I drag content to that screen, it gets seen by remote users who are dialed in on Teams or WebEx or anything really. So that Solstice conferencing agnostic approach to being able to tie everything that happens in a Solstice display through your existing VTC is super critical to the remote learner use case, I think. So that's coming as well, and I'm sure we'll want to shoot a whole nother demo of that because I think it's pretty interesting how it works. Okay, so how do you get hold of this? Well, every single pod that is on 4, 5, or greater has a 30-day free trial of active routing in it. So all you have to do is go into the Solstice Cloud. Your pod has to be onboarded into the cloud, but then go into your account. You'll see there's now an Active Learning tab in the Solstice Cloud. Go to that tab, select the pods that you want. We'll tell you, yep, you have 30 days remaining. You can do it anytime you want. There's no clock. You could wait a year, you could wait a week, you could do it immediately and start it. And then as soon as you've done that, you can download the app, create a user for yourself, get hold of the app, and log into your account and begin routing video, just like I did. We're just right out of the App Store. You can, of course, download the other platforms from our website directly on Windows, OS X, or go to the various app stores. So the other way to do it is get a trial bundle. So every Gen 3 pod, like I said, has that trial, but you can also get hold of demo pods. So if you go to mersive.com Active Learning, you can request a demo kit from us, which will basically be a 4-pack of pre-enabled, ready to go Solstice Active Learning enabled pods. So you grab those, we're pretty sensitive about making you take pods out of an existing teaching and learning space to try out active learning. So you can get a hold of those 4-packs, set them up in a lab somewhere, set them up in a teaching and learning space, and go. Now, again, the trial's there because we know that we're already at team tables often, but being routed through existing video switching hardware. So just go to those classrooms, enable all 6 of your tables, and you can kind of unplug the switch and see what you would get without that additional hardware. And then, of course, you can purchase active learning pods. All you have to do is get a quote. And for sure, we have educational pricing and multi-year discounts as well. Now, just a quick comment about pricing. We, of course, wanted to come well underneath, given the social mission of making this really flexible and easy to use, and making active learning, unlocking the potential of active learning. We also wanted to make sure that we weren't falling into the trap of, I need to go to the dean or the provost and get a giant capital expense to get started with active learning, okay? So that's why we went with what we call a subscription model. It allows you to opt in for 1 up to 5 years to say, I want to use it for a while, but the reality is if you're doing a year-to-year or a license that you find a pod that's just not being used. So let's say I have a 6-team table room and the 6th table just isn't used. I overcommitted. Well, in the old model, you've already built that room and the dean's going to come calling and go, the budget was too big and, we got to rethink what you're doing here. Well, now you can take that pod and unplug it, take it out of its subscription, move it to a huddle space, and you're really only out that 1 year of subscription. So we did it that way to encourage flexibility and the use of the pods as they move around your campus. So hopefully that'll help. I think it's pretty exciting. Hopefully you guys think it is too. I kind of feel like we cheated a little bit because we had some great partners throughout the last 2 years helping us think through how to build active learning, what the UI should be, what feature sets we need. And stay tuned as the roadmap continues to evolve. And if you have thoughts and you start to use it, make sure you reach out to us, of course. But go to mersive.com active learning to get started. I think that's key. We're really hoping that we're transforming the way educational spaces view the active learning environment to something that's not just a giant, cumbersome commitment, something that's flexible, easy to use, and actually fun. So get out there and use it, and thanks for joining the webinar. There's been a lot of activity in the Q&A side. So I'm gonna take a quick look over here and try to wrap some of these questions together. We've got about 15 to 20 minutes, so I think we'll have some time to get through several of these. Here's a good one. Let's talk about the use of the AMX panel. So remember that the active learning product is a front-end product that takes the pods and lets them act like AV over IP encoders with the use of our app. Now behind that, there is an API. If you wanted to say, for example, put a Crestron panel on the wall that says clear all screens or route, primary to all screens, you could build that interface pretty straightforward using the APIs. And you wouldn't have to use our app. So someone was asking, do I need the app if I'm going to just build it entirely from third-party control? No, you don't really need the app. The app is available as our interpretation of what the productized version of a front end should look like for active learning. Now, keep in mind, the app will continue to evolve pretty rapidly, and I mentioned some of the things in the roadmap along those lines. They'll have more and more sort of teaching and learning specifics arriving in it. So the questions like, can it work with a Crestron panel? Absolutely. It's just a REST API. So just imagine hitting a URL that says begin sending your video to this other IP address, and it starts. And related to that, someone was asking, what's the underlying protocol? So probably someone pretty sophisticated from a networking perspective. Yeah, the networking protocol is not broadcast. It's not multicast. So you don't have to worry about flooding your switch and things. Now, remember I showed you the network topology diagram. The pods are located next to each screen or in a rack somewhere, but you need 1 pod per display. We've had a few questions about that. The pods are routed through an Ethernet cable to your switch, and that switch then, of course, routes back into the campus network. That allows you to be on the faculty network and then stream content into the array of pods or talk to them through the app. Now, the pods don't have to directly talk to the cloud to make this work. The app does, and that was an explicit choice because we needed to make sure that, when you, build custom routing, for example, then then that stuff gets stored in your account. So imagine a faculty member that arrives to teach one day with their iPad, forgets it the next day, but can open their Windows laptop and log in to the same app on that laptop and see all of their shortcuts that they've created. So that's a really good question. So how many pods can we support? That's an awesome question. I just mentioned that we have that the white paper that will just give you exactly our sort of scientific analysis of frame rate and bandwidth requirements as you increase the number of team tables. But right now, you could for sure get frame rate across 12 table rooms. And then you start to see about a frame or two a second as you fall off as you add tables. So if your use case is, hey, I'm happy with 20 frames a second, you can get a very large active learning room. Now, most active learning spaces are 6 to 12 tables at most. So I think we should be okay there. But keep an eye on some of our performance enhancements that are coming in the roadmap as well. So let's talk about pricing for a minute. There's probably 5 or 6 questions along those lines, and I'm not surprised. It's not a traditional pricing model, I admit that, and we did that intentionally because I don't think the right way to build an active learning room, and I'm just so, it's almost like a social mission for me. I don't want to see, these big capital expense 6-month projects, break drywall, build an active learning space, because everyone on this call probably knows where that leads. It leads to very few active learning spaces being enabled. Instead, you could take an existing pod with a Gen 3 pod, current hardware, and activate a subscription license on it, and now it's ready to be part of an active learning room. So that buys you some really interesting flexibility. If you're already one of our bigger edu customers that has hundreds of pods and you want to take them out of a space and recommission them somewhere else, you can do that by going into your cloud account and literally just activating the subscription. So on the pricing side, if you look at the total cost of ownership over 5 years of, say, for example, a 6-table room, you're way underneath any of the other approaches here. You're several, $10,000 at least underneath, cheaper than a hardware solution, and you're even cheaper than some of the other competitive software solutions out there. That's definitely where we wanted to land. So it's very, very cost effective. About every the pricing, you'd have to ask your RSD or your regional sales or your reseller to get pricing, but it's about $500 a year list with steep discounts as you add more years. So if you go to a 5-year subscription because you're committed to a 6-table room or a 10-table room, you're in for far less than the $500 per table. And what does that give you? It gives you active routing. It gives you unlimited users in the app, unlimited use of that application, unlimited routing of the content, unlimited custom accounts, unlimited role-based management in the cloud. It also, of course, includes the Solstice subscription. So that means our entire roadmap for Solstice, the hardware warranty for all those units, and there's some other things, of course, that come with that, like analytics. So you can imagine if you've been looking at what we're doing with Solstice Cloud and our analytics engines there's some pretty sophisticated data that's starting to emerge inside your accounts about, what's the utilization rates. We're looking at very educational specific analytics. So for example, which team table is most engaged in an active learning space? So that's all covered underneath that one single simple subscription. So if you are under a Solstice subscription today, you just upgrade it to an active learning subscription. It would include your Solstice subscription and everything I just mentioned. So to get more details, of course, just talk to your reseller integrator or reach out to us directly. Okay. So someone's asking, can it work if a pod is completely on Wi-Fi? We've tested that. It does work. Our Wi-Fi chip, of course, has way less bandwidth than the Ethernet. So if you wanted to, for example, I'm probably picturing you're wanting to put team tables on rolling carts. You can do that. I don't think you should scale it to 12. Maybe what I need to do is update that white paper you can find on mersive.com/classroom to include the Wi-Fi enabled use case. So you could take a look. How do you ensure someone else doesn't get into your room control? So it's all role-based management. So let me take you through how that works. Your Solstice Cloud administrator would then create an account for you if you're an admin that can manage and create rooms. then when you download that app and you log into your account, you'll get an email invite from the Solstice Cloud that says you've been invited to use the app. When you log in, you'll create a password and it's all secure. Other users can't create rooms unless they have permissions to do so. And then other users can then route rooms interactively. Now, in the follow-on release, we will have you type a screen key on login to do physical authentication, just like you do with Solstice. So that's coming very soon. We have a great question here on audio support. So, you guys probably know me well enough to know how transparent I am. I didn't want to get audio wrong, and building audio systems in multi-screen environments is complex. So what we did is we worked with our beta community to find out what we needed to do. And it turns out if you've got an audio room system, you can connect it to one pod. And when you do that, we will know what that pod is, and then we will route audio to that pod when it's a destination. So for example, if you've got a team table that's looking at YouTube and you want to show it on the primary screen to all students, you would broadcast it to all students. It would hit that primary screen, and if that primary pod is routed to your room audio, we would then route the audio synchronously to that destination. What we won't do is send audio arbitrarily to team tables, because you end up getting desync and other issues, and it becomes an incredibly expensive system to try to avoid those problems. So we're not going to do that. Beta users seem very happy with our plans, and that will happen in a quick follow-on release in the next few months. So there's questions about role-based management tying into AD. That's absolutely in plan, in general, in fact. So if you log into Solstice Cloud, we're going to add single sign-on, because we're using Auth0 as the library, and that can front end your LDAP or AD on-prem or cloud-based single sign-on system. So that way you would have basically one place, one-stop shopping for all of your single sign-on and role-based management. That I don't know exactly when that's coming on the roadmap, but it's for sure coming this year. Can HDMI input on the front of the Gen 3 pod be leveraged and controlled and switched by the app? That's an awesome question, and absolutely it can. Early on, I demoed that at EDUCAUSE. You could take a document camera, for example, and plug it into the HDMI input on one of your screens, and then broadcast that to all team tables. So I think that's a killer use case. I have a similar question about in-room PCs. Run your in-room PC that same way, and you can route it to destinations. So if your faculty are used to logging into the in-room PC and they want to take advantage of routing what's happening on their PowerPoint or their Google Docs to all those team tables, you can do it that way as well. So it's kind of fun to start to think about how the pod has become such an interesting platform with all these I/O ports, all the different sources wirelessly, and of course when you combine it with things like conference. So let's see what else we've got here. Talk a little bit about the Solstice Cloud. Okay, yeah, so if you're not familiar with Solstice Cloud, that's just part of your Solstice subscription. If you're out of subscription, you still have access to the cloud to see usage statistics, for example, for all your pods. And it's a modern single pane of glass global management portal for your pod fleet. So we have some users up to 4,000 to 5,000 pods globally, and you can define templates and push them to your pods. That's really, really interesting capability. If you're under subscription, you can get analytics, you can get live feedback on what's happening in those rooms, all kinds of stuff. And that's where you'll manage your active learning. Okay? So that's a really good question. Is it required to have a cloud account? Yes, it is, to get your AL application. It is. You can download the app from the app stores or off our own website under that classroom URL, but you need to use the cloud to activate the pods. Now today, for example, if you're a user, you can literally go into your Solstice Cloud account and pick some of your pods, and all of them that are in 4, 5, or greater have a 30-day free trial. You can just start doing what I just demoed to you. So it's kind of fun to go in and take a look at that quick. Can't we use the pod if it isn't activated? You absolutely can use the pod for team table sharing. So today, pods sit at team tables all over the world. Students collaborate and share content together. They use our app to control what they're looking at. But if you want to be able to route that output to all the other team tables, go into your Solstice Cloud and activate those. Hey, there's an interesting question about, hey, if I get demo pods off the website or you ship me demo pods, will they be active learning enabled? Absolutely. So we will ship you a 4-pack of demo pods. with active learning pre-enabled, and we will even auto onboard them into a new cloud account for you. And then you would get an email from us that says your 4 pods are on the way. Click here to log into your cloud account, and then you'd be able to go in and even see that side of the things. Is there a fee to create a cloud account? No. Role-based management, you can, if your pods are routable, it's really unlimited. So you can create as many user accounts as you need. Let's see here. Are we able to regularly change the routing UI to match our university standard to that of our, oh, interesting. That's a really good question. That's the kind of stuff that I can't wait to be hearing more about. So it sounds like you would want to brand the front end of the UI and maybe even customize it. I'm talking with a couple universities that were in beta, like Dartmouth, Penn State, Stanford, a few others that are asking the same. They want to simplify the UI or customize it per room in a totally unique way. We'll be adding that stuff in the roadmap. Now remember, there's the design side of the app itself. We've talked about even allowing teams to have icons at team tables, because at some universities they'll assign, an animal or something to the cohort of students that work at those desks. Will USB-C be routable similar to the HDMI? Oh, that's a great question. Not as a content input today. USB-C is part of the Solstice conference application. So if you aren't going pure wireless to start a call, you can use the USB-C cable to trigger a call if you're using Teams or Zoom or WebEx. How many HDMI inputs are there? There's a single HDMI in on the front of on the Gen 3 pods. Someone's asking, can I use Gen 2? No, you can't, but please just reach out to us and we'll get a swap in place for you. Just make sure you visit the website, reach out, and we will get you either a 4-pack of Gen 3s to look at, or we'll talk about swapping out your Gen 2s. Let's see. How many different groups? I think I answered that one. Is there a perpetual license option? Oh, yeah, I should point that out. Good question. Yes, we will sell you bundled SKUs. So if you wanted to buy a 5-year, 7-year, whatever, just let us know. The other thing I'll point out is if you have a room that is subscribed to 5 years or greater, then the APIs will work forever for perpetual. So that way your Crestron panel will be able to talk to that room forever to route video. So I don't want to break something that your consultants have designed for you, or you built yourself, or you wrote code to do. Okay, let's see. Can the orange team see a split screen of the red and purple team on their display? Great question. So you'll notice when I demoed to you that I was allowing team tables to share content to other team tables. So for example, the red team can be shown on the purple team. And you'll also have noticed that I showed multiple teams being compared on a primary display. We actually don't allow multiple teams to route to a team table. So the answer is no, but let me tell you why. It's really important. Turns out in our research over 2 years of doing this, students get confused when that happens. And we want to do, our approach to design is typically, let's stay away from things that could cause confusion or have people sort of get into those meta discussions about, why am I looking at this or what is that? I won't name the university, but I actually witnessed this happening where, a team of students was thought they were looking at their content because they had 2 documents posted. And then when the faculty member routed 2 tables it looked similar and they were getting confused. So we are avoiding that now. The consensus amongst the educational community was that that's a fairly corner case, use case anyway. So let's leave it off the table for now. And if we could figure out a way to make it more obvious that that's happening, we'll add it. But for now, it's just not a capability in product. So here's one. When using flexible space set up for active learning, will be an issue if using different LCD displays and models from various manufacturers? Nope, not at all. You should be able to be fine because you'll just, as long as we have EDID support on the pod, which we do for a very, very large number of displays, you should be fine. So yes, flexibility. Do we have a recording option? Not today. We do have some faculty that use our software edition of Solstice installed on a room PC, and then they'll run something like, recording software on top of that to do it. we are looking at in the roadmap for Solstice itself a way to do sort of what I would call a PDF logbook, be able to capture key events and then create a PDF document that covers it. Is pricing already published? Yes, if you reach out to your reseller integrators, they have the updated pricing, both educational discounts and multi-year discounts, things like that. Someone asked that I mentioned there are templates available in Solstice Cloud. Are those available now? Good question. They are to about 25 large corporations, and they're rolling out that capability right now as we speak. So in the next few days, you should be able to go in and see what we call Solstice management writ large. So there's a question about, are there existing national education contracts? That's a great question. Charles, do you want to just email me that offline? I'd like to respond to that. Along those lines, we're also looking at building a pedagogy community around active learning. So I've had a few people in beta ask, hey, it would be awesome if you could somehow facilitate a community of educators that are using these spaces to share best practices. We're going to take that on. It sounds a little altruistic, but I think it's really valuable for us to be able to talk to each other about how do you use these spaces beyond, just a single, teaching and learning methodology. So we've been sort of gathering up data on some of these. We're probably going to publish some of that on our website, so keep an eye out for that for sure. Let's see. You mentioned, I can't get to all these. There's so many awesome questions here. You mentioned there are templates of it. Okay, I already took that one. And most of these are now saying, thank you very much. Impressive. Can't wait to consult with our IT folks to get it done. Okay, that's awesome. You know what? I just want to end by saying thanks for being such a strong community. We have a whole lot of people on this webinar. I'm really impressed by people's level of engagement around this. I think we really have an opportunity over the next 12 to 18 months to change the way we view active learning. It should not be a incredibly high-end, complex solution. I think what should happen is we should see this thing transform and become pervasive and actually maybe a much more popular teaching and learning model that's beneficial to all the students out there. So glad to see all the excitement around the solution. Please make sure you reach out to us, and thank you very much.